Part 1. A Ruined Day. The wind briskly drove dark. Heavy clouds across the leaden sky. The rain would stop pouring, only to start again as if from a bucket. The weather had turned bad since the very morning, ruining all the plans of a medical school student. Yaroslav sadly looked out the window for the umpteenth time, swore under his breath, and shuffled to the kitchen to brew some hibiscus tea. Saturday was officially ruined. And even if the weather miraculously changed for the better, there was no way the date was happening. The latest girl he had arranged to meet today clearly wouldn't want to stroll through a wet park. But that was fine, maybe on the next weekend, or he would just find someone else. After all, when you have money, you don't have problems with the opposite sex. And if all his plans for the day were ruined, he could dedicate himself to studying, or rather, reviewing and reinforcing the material he had covered. For a medical student, especially in the final year, this would not be a waste of time. Although almost anyone could be bribed, there were professors in certain subjects who put on airs and wouldn't take money, which many had studied. Yaroslav, the only son of wealthy parents, was a promising young man. Thanks to his finances, he grew up spoiled and self-absorbed, which is not uncommon. And it was all because of his upbringing. Everything came easily to him from childhood. At his first request, he got excellent grades only thanks to money and unscrupulous teachers. And since his parents had the funds to ensure their only offspring didn't wander through rented apartments or worse, get corrupted in a dorm, they gave him a 2-bedroom apartment on the top, 13th floor of a newly built house right after school. And if he graduated from the institute with honors, the next gift would be a new foreign car from a dealership. So everything was in his hands. Yaroslav looked out the window one more time and scowled in displeasure. He didn't like the rain or the weather and the Ural climate in general. Sighing in disappointment, the guy sat down with his lecture notes. Part 2. The first knock. Closer to nightfall, Yaroslav set his notebook aside and looked at the clock. It was almost 11. He had gotten completely lost in his studies today. It was time to have dinner and watch some comedy. A habitual ritual before bed. Returning from the kitchen with a plate of sandwiches and a large mug of tea, the guy opened his laptop and began searching for a suitable film. But as he started the movie, he paused it. His sensitive hearing picked up a strange sound. He listened closely. The sound repeated itself, but it couldn't be. Through the monotonous drumming of the rain, a barely audible knock could be heard. A knock on the 13th floor window. Deciding he was imagining things, Yarek continued watching the movie. 5 minutes later, the student nearly jumped in his seat. The knocking repeated, but this time it was noticeably louder. Not believing his ears, the guy turned off the light, cautiously approached the window, and peered into the night, but saw nothing. He thought the raging wind had torn off an antenna or some wires, and they were now tapping on the glass. But there was nothing of the sort. There was nothing outside the window at all. Finding no explanation, Yaroslav returned to his laptop. He clearly didn't believe in the supernatural. He was a future doctor and a man of science, and therefore in all situations, he relied on evidence and logic. But no more than 5 minutes passed before the knocking repeated, monotonous and dreary. Just like the last time, the guy noticed nothing in the night darkness. It made him feel uneasy. But unable to find an explanation for what was happening, Yaroslav decided to go to bed. Lying in bed, he wondered for a long time what could have caused this strange and unusual sound. Maybe it was some kind of physical phenomenon in the concrete walls. The house shifting or something. He was a medic, not a builder, and therefore couldn't know about all the processes concerning houses. But no matter what, there had to be a logical explanation. While the young man was reassuring himself, the knocking stopped as unexpectedly as it had started, and soon Yarek fell into a peaceful sleep. Part 3. The scratch appears. In the morning. The student forgot about the unexplained moment from the night before, but he remembered it as soon as late evening came and the darkness took hold. He was sitting at his laptop, watching a movie, when a knock came to the window, this time noticeably louder and without warning. A shiver ran down Yarek's spine, turning into a frantic goosebump-covered chill, and his feet went cold. But he subconsciously decided to just not show it. The student turned up the volume and, laughing unnaturally, continued to watch the stupid American comedy. But after a series of such sounds, a completely different sound deafened the room. The long, loud scraping sound sliced through the glass, as if someone mocking him was slowly scratching the window from the outside with something metallic and sharp. From this sound, the frightened guy jumped up and started rushing around the apartment, turning on every light. Nearly trembling with fear, Yaroslav approached the windowsill to gaze out into night and then looked to the sides of the window. But, as in all the previous cases, he saw nothing. But that didn't make him feel any better. Reassuring himself out loud that it was only unknown physical processes in the concrete walls or the double-glazed window, the guy first walked in circles in the room, and then, after turning on the lights in every space, he went to bed. Although the knocking and scraping did not repeat, he had a hard time falling asleep. Yaroslav stood for about 10 minutes with his mouth open, staring at the window in the living room. A straight vertical scratch, no less than 30 centimeters long, ran down the center of the double-glazed window, and since it was in the middle of the window, a torn cable was out of the question. Again, not finding an answer, Yaroslav went to his classes, having even forgotten to have breakfast. Part 4, the third evening in a vision. At the Institute, surrounded by people in the light of day, Yarek did remember the strange knocking, but he didn't dwell on it. Or rather, he tried not to. As soon as the thoughts appeared, he immediately pushed them away, switching his attention to friends or studying. But he tried. On the way home, his thoughts involuntarily returned to the last 2 nights, and the darker it got outside, the more anxiety tormented him. But the medical student didn't want to tell anyone about the strange sound. They would think he was crazy, especially since it wasn't something serious, just some unexplained knocking and a strange scratch on the glass. Everything must have a logical explanation, everything. He just didn't know it yet. But no matter how much Yaroslav tried to calm himself, with the approach of night, the anxiety only grew. In every rustle, he expected a knock and reflexively looked toward the window, but to his relief, the sound of unknown origin did not return. Calming down, Yarek, after reviewing a few topics, went to bed. He was quite tired today. Being a candidate for an honors degree in medicine is extremely difficult. It requires a lot of attention and memory, even in his exceptional financial position. Or maybe it was precisely because of overwork that he was hearing this sound. But then how to explain the scratch? Thinking this way, the exhausted student fell into a deep sleep. However, barely an hour later, the student jumped up in bed and, looking around, began to scream in fear. The window was being knocked on loudly and rhythmically. As soon as he started screaming, the knock subsided. Cursing himself for his cowardice, Yarek resolutely got out of bed and, at an accelerated pace, approached the window. But as soon as he crossed the threshold of the living room and looked at it, he froze in place. His legs instantly turned to jelly. He blinked quickly and rubbed his eyes, not wanting to believe what he'd seen a second ago. It was as if someone was looking at him from the other side of the window, from the street on the 13th floor, and as soon as the guy entered the room, this unknown figure disappeared around the corner. Slowly coming to his senses, Yaroslav began to walk in circles in the room and, shaking his head, muttered to himself, "It's all hallucinations, all glitches. I'm overtired, exhausted. I need help, or valerian, or better yet, both." He behaved this way for about 10 minutes, and then he abruptly got up, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and, leaving all the lights on, returned to the bedroom. He slept completely covered by the blanket, leaving only a small opening so that, in the morning, Yaroslav woke up only to the 3rd alarm and was almost late for his first class. Part 5. The creature at the window. He was on edge all day. His friends' jokes didn't amuse him, and he had a hard time absorbing the material. He kept thinking about the knocking and whether he had just imagined the unknown figure or not. Or maybe he was going crazy from overwork. The previously sociable and cheerful guy became gloomier than a storm cloud. His classmates noticed this, but the guy brushed off all inquiries and assured them that everything was fine. For the first time, he didn't want to go home, but calming himself down that he was just overtired and that it was all just a dream, the student trudged his apartment after class. When he got home, he immediately sat down at his laptop, having neither the appetite nor the desire to eat. The studied material. He just needed to rest, and everything would be fine. But the comedies weren't funny and sleep wouldn't come. Jarek tried to fall asleep, but after tossing and turning in bed for about an hour, he sat back down at the computer. But as soon as the clock hands passed midnight, the window was knocked on again, loudly and rhythmically. After a momentary pause, Yaroslav spun around and, screaming in fright, jumped out of his chair. But his legs went numb with fear, and he fell to the floor, his gaze fixed on a window, because on the other side of the double-glazed window, something was looking at him. This something was bald, excessively thin, and had completely black eyes. Its smooth skin had a gray tint, and through it, webs of tiny brown veins were visible. It had no shoulders, and along its torso, just like a centipede, for pairs of thin and sinewy arms grew. The creature, violating all conceivable laws of physics, held onto the smooth glass with them. Its torso below the waist was not visible, the anthropomorphic being bared its teeth, showing a dozen sharp piranha teeth and sticking out a long black tongue. It licked the glass with relish, closing its pupilless eyes in pleasure. This is what pulled the student out of his stupor. He let out a loud, high-pitched shriek, jumped up, and ran into the bathroom, locking himself inside. And the creature began to knock, hitting harder and harder each time, like a persistent and unwelcome guest who wants to be let in. It seemed as if the glass would break at any moment, but it didn't happen. The creature knocked on the window almost until morning, and Yaroslav, huddled between the bathtub and the washing machine, trembled with terror. He was so frightened that he didn't even dare to think about returning to the living room to get his phone from the table. But as soon as the first rays of the spring sun appeared on the horizon, the creature, striking the glass in anger, disappeared. The student sat in the bathroom for another 10 minutes, and only then came out. No, something definitely had to be done about this. Part 6. The Plan and the Return. Yaroslav called the head of his class, and, citing a fictitious illness, he warned that he would not be in class. As an excellent student, they believed him, especially since he sometimes gave his classmates money. In private, he pondered for a long time what kind of creature this was and what to do now. And at one fine moment, with a blissful smile, he joyfully slapped himself on the forehead. Right, there must be a reason why the creature was knocking on the window, and not just breaking in. It was, apparently, some kind of evil spirit that needed to be let in willingly, just like in stupid horror stories or mystical folklore. And if this rule applied to it, then he wasn't in any danger as long as he didn't invite the creature in. And Yaroslav certainly wasn't going to invite this thing over, just in case. He armed himself with a kitchen knife, and the student went to sleep to make up for the sleepless night. Something told him that the creature would return again tonight. Waking up closer to 9 in the evening, the guy almost cut his hand with his improvised weapon, which for some reason he had hidden under his pillow. Jarek had messed up his biological clock, and was now more awake than ever. But that was good. If the creature came, he would be waiting for it, and wouldn't run and hide in the bathroom like a cowardly girl. He wasn't going to call anyone either. Loving to explain everything, Yaroslav didn't rule out the possibility of persistent hallucinations. He just needed to endure it, and everything would be fine. But the most interesting thing was that he waited for this night without fear, but only with a slight thrill. But that was only until the bald and thin creature knocked on the window again. With the onset of darkness, the unwelcome guest returned, and all of Yaroslav's pompous courage vanished in an instant. He slid down under the computer desk, clutching the knife in both hands. But the creature seemed to be taunting him. It knocked on the living room window, sometimes sniffing and pressing itself close to the glass, or would lick the dirty, dusty glass again with relish. But seeing his lack of reaction, the anthropomorphic being began to run along the walls of the house, and now hammered on the kitchen and bedroom windows. Yaroslav, although he trembled with terror, no longer thought of running and hiding, because as long as he didn't personally invite this evil spirit in, it wouldn't enter. In essence, the guy was in no danger, except for sleepless nights. Just like the previous night, the creature left with the first rays of the sun. Yaroslav called the head of his class again, and warned him that he wouldn't be in class. He politely hinted that although Jarek was a candidate for an honors degree, it would still be a good idea to have a doctor's note, so there wouldn't be any unnecessary questions. And they both understood perfectly well where to buy one. Thanking him for the advice, Yaroslav ended the conversation and went to bed. He already had a plan of how to taunt the creature, so it would lose interest in him. Part 7, Broken Defense. As soon as night came, the gray anthropomorphic being returned. It knocked loudly, licked the glass, and then froze in amazement. Yaroslav, cheerfully singing along to songs on his laptop, first brewed himself some hibiscus tea, and then stood up. He sat down at the computer desk and, casually propping his feet up on it, began to bob his head to the music. Then the creature started hitting more aggressively, but the student, without even glancing at the creature, turned up the volume and, savoring his drink, dramatically relaxed. Although in reality, his heart was about to burst from his chest, and cold sweat ran down his back. But as long as he didn't invite the creature in, he had nothing to fear. Seeing this, the thing roared with rage and began to run along the walls of the house, striking the windows. The glass shook, and it seemed that at any moment it would shatter and cover the floor with its crystal blanket. This continued for a long half-hour. Finally, Yaroslav, gathering his courage, got up from his chair and, tightly gripping the knife, went out to the center of the room. The creature, watching him carefully, froze. The guy caught his breath and, making his voice as menacing as possible, began to speak, pointing his weapon toward the creature. "Now you listen to me and listen carefully. I won't let you in, and I won't invite you, no matter how much you knock on the windows. I don't care at all. You can run in circles out there all day if you want. I won't let you in, no matter what you do. I hope I'm making myself clear. You won't enter here, got it?" Hearing this, the creature smiled sinisterly and, as usual, licked the glass, then moved back a good half-meter, holding onto a windowsill with only its two lower arms. And then, after trembling several times, it revealed a long spike with a bony growth on the end from behind its back. This was what it had used to scratch the glass on the second night. The swing was drowned out by a loud clang, and broken glass rained into the apartment. Seeing this, Yaroslav was numb with terror. Part 8, the end. The creature then delivered a few more blows, and in 1 second was inside the apartment. The student, not expecting this, dropped the knife in shock, and a characteristically smelly fluid ran down his pants leg, forming a large yellow puddle on the laminate floor. Now he saw the thing in all its terrifying beauty, or rather, ugliness. Unlike its thin body and 4 pairs of sinewy arms, the anthropomorphic creature had massive and muscular legs. Even for a creature, it looked like a genetic freak. Yarok, as pale as a wall, couldn't even move a finger. He only had the strength to whimper quietly in fear. No, the creature was not his hallucination. And no, it didn't need an invitation to enter the house. It was just a game invented by it. The creature lunged and, knocking the student to the floor, sank its sharp teeth into his stomach. But it didn't kill him right away. It began to eat him alive, slowly, chewing on the bitter from stressed liver, exactly the kind it loved. The guy screamed, calling for help, but it was too late. A multitude of sinewy arms held the struggling victim, while the thing slowly devoured the warm human entrails. The creature had frightened Yaroslav on purpose. It simply loved the bitterness that was present in the organs of a victim when they were petrified with fear. The neighbors heard the screams and started knocking on the door, asking if he needed help. But by that time, the guy was gasping and spitting up blood, living his last few seconds. The anthropomorphic being, having finished its meal and satiated itself with the student's insides, unhurriedly left the apartment the same way it had come. Yaroslav was found in the morning by his parents, whom the neighbors had called, and the creature, having eaten a few more people in their city, moved on to another, where it would first scare people with knocking, and then feast on human liver with that characteristic pleasant bitterness.